We would like to take this opportunity to thank the sponsors. The Green Hydrogen Summit South Africa 2022 Cape Town was sponsored by Sasol, Anglo American, Aqua Power, Industrial Development Corporation, the Northern Cape Province, Western Cape Government, and Wesgrow, in partnership with the Republic of South Africa, German Corporation, Infrastructure South Africa, and the Digital Council. Infrastructure South Africa is an infrastructure center of excellence and is established as a single point of entry for infrastructure planning, management, and delivery. Infrastructure South Africa is a catalyst for closing the infrastructure investment gap and meeting the infrastructure target set out in the National Development Plan and provides best practices in project preparation, leadership on infrastructure planning, technical and financial support for nationally prioritized infrastructure projects and programs. We would like to take this opportunity to thank the sponsors. The Green Hydrogen Summit South Africa 2022 Cape Town was sponsored by Sasol, Anglo American, Aqua Power, Industrial Development Corporation, the Northern Cape Province, Western Cape Government, and Wesgrow, in partnership with the Republic of South Africa, German Corporation, Infrastructure South Africa, and the Digital Council.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining this session, the country presentation by Germany. We have, we are hoping to have a very good session. And I always say, generally, these small breakaway sessions, it's when the actual conference starts, right? We had the president addressing us this morning, a very important brief. We had the high-level panel, a very, very important one. But of course, because there was little engagement on there, all that we really needed to do was to take away. And we know that the conversation around just transition has been and continues to be one of the most important one. And more so that, and I was sharing with the people that were at the dinner last night, I had the honor and opportunity to be the MC. One of the things that I was sharing was an article that is written in yesterday's Business Day, where the Public Investment Corporation, South Africa's biggest asset manager, they've reported that they are committing close to 4.3 trillion rands in investment in green hydrogen. I believe that deserves a round of applause. And starting right away, may I please ask my panelists to please come and join us on the panel so that we can start our panel. I'm only seeing 4. I am not seeing, oh, you're sitting at the back. Anyway, may she sit in the middle because she's the rose amongst thorns. Thank you so much. One of the other things that I raised yesterday, or at least, and this was specifically after Professor Dr. Ramokgopa had made his remarks yesterday, because one of the things that he did was he went on to speak about the number of projects that South Africa is embarking on. I indicated that, or at least in my view, or my takeaway, was that there is a huge need for emphasis on communication, right? And of course, somebody may call it a showcase or putting out case studies. And this really is, I'm hoping, what this session is going to be really about, particularly that, in fact, in my head, as I was preparing for this session, I was calling it Indlela ibuzwa abaphambili. Which is a Zulu phrase that says you ask for guidance from those who have walked the path before you. As South Africa, even if you read that article from the Business Day, a lot of it is how we are only starting now. We are literally in the initial phases of exploiting and exploring this green economy frontier. And it therefore is important that those with the likes of Germany that started way ahead of us may then share insights. Of course, those who are already players in this space, the likes of H2 Global, may also share a little bit of insights in terms of how we go ahead with it. And allow me to introduce my panelists first. We have Mr. Tilly Mansman, who's the Commissioner of Innovation and Green Hydrogen, Germany, Federal Ministry of Education and Research. Mr. Tilly, wave to the... We also have Mr. Timo Bollery, who is the Managing Director of H2 Global. We have Dr. Tobias Boshoff-Nims, who is the Head of Division at New Energy Solutions, Enatrag, South Africa. And the rose amongst thorns, Husia Mekweli, who is the Vice President, Strategy, Pricing and Regulation at Sasol. We also have, he's a new entrant on my program, Ferguson Feldman, the CEO of Atlantia. So, Mr. Tim, as the only politician amongst the bureaucrats, I guess, and as I've said, the challenge with South Africa, in fact, yesterday, one of the things that the quote that I made was from former Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, who was saying something to the effect that it is important that when you do something, focus on one thing and not to try and do many things all at once. And perhaps starting this session, what are some of what does a just transition look like? What did it look like for Germany? But in particular, because you have the benefit of hindsight, what was that one thing that if you were talking to South Africans in the room and other African countries who are in the room, that if you were to focus on that to do this green hydrogen properly, what would that thing be?
I think it's very important to see what the challenge really is. And finally, the challenge is to replace all this huge fossil energy market by a new renewable market. And for this, H2, hydrogen is the core. Because without hydrogen, without the possibility to store and transport energy in form of molecules, this will not be achievable globally. And I think this needs a new forms of cooperation internationally to form this new market. This is what we want to get finally. And every country has to do its part of it. Yeah? For Germany, it means we know in Germany that we will be a net energy importer for a long time, for a very long time. So we are interested globally on an hydrogen market, which replaces the fossil market. Yeah? And it needs to be renewable. And we also want to take on this way every country which is a possible deliverer of green energy. Germany is a small country by territory, with a big population and in winter, especially in winter, great need of energy. In other countries, that's very different situations. And we have to put this together to a global strategy.
Interesting, and you speak about the importance of transportation and storage, right? We definitely can then not take away the fact that you are one of the countries that have been hard hit and affected by the Russia-Ukraine war, right? On a practical level, what does that mean, considering that I understand that generally the Netherlands is a very important gateway in terms of you importing particularly anything that has to do with, if you're looking at hydrogen as an example. What does infrastructure, or what should infrastructure look like to ensure that it facilitates precisely what you're raising, the issue of transportation and storage?
If you mention the war from Russia against Ukraine, of course, everybody knows this is a real big challenge for Germany in the moment. But this is a very different question from the long-term transformation into green hydrogen. And green hydrogen will not be the solution for the actual problems Germany has now, right now. It's a very different question. Also for infrastructure. In the moment, the first answers were to install LNG terminals at the German coast. This is a real reaction on the war, and we said those terminals need to be H2 ready. So on the long term, we want them to be able to import hydrogen or its derivatives. But this is a different question. Finally, we need a hydrogen infrastructure for all over Europe, and of course we need a close cooperation, especially with the Netherlands, but also with France and Poland and the others. Germany is surrounded by a lot of countries, I think nine countries surrounding or being around us. And we need them and they need us. Yeah? And it's just possible in a close cooperation. And finally, I want this kind of cooperation also, especially between Europe and Africa.
And I'm going to come back to what that cooperation looks like, because that cooperation would not work if there is no funding or some sort of investment that is in it. Mr. Bolahi, share with our visitors today what your role as H2 Global is, what and how you work, so that we then are able to connect what the commissioner was saying now, particularly around collaboration.
Yeah, we're very likely to do so. H2 Global is a market ramp-up instrument that has been set up by the German government that tries to overcome that chicken and egg situation that we have at the moment in the markets. I mean, every day we read about the MOUs that are being signed globally, not only in South Africa, but globally for green hydrogen and derivatives production. But we need to take that step from MOU to FID. Sure. I mean, this is the important factor that we need to bring in. We heard this morning You know, in Saudi Arabia with Aqua Power, yes, there is a large-scale program, but that's more or less the only one on a global scale. So what we're trying to set up is really an innovative form of a subsidy scheme, overcoming that chicken and egg situation, chicken and egg where we have relatively high production costs for green hydrogen, a market price or price that potentially could be achieved in the market, which is much lower. We have falling marginal costs, and we have huge uncertainties in regards to the regulatory environment that will come in the next 10 years, standardization, certification. So what we're trying to provide today is an investment case to start production, to get from MOU to FID by providing long-term offtake agreements, providing price security, locked-in prices for 10 years, to provide a market risk or market risk enhancement by having a government-backed off-taker, and providing legal certainty, because we're agreeing now for a 10-year period the criteria, how the green attributes are being determined for that period in time. So what we create is an intermediary, a physical intermediary. We call it the HINCO, the Hydrogen Intermediary Company. And I always refer to HINCO as the most stupid company in Germany and Europe at the moment, because as HINCO, I'm buying a product relatively expensive and selling it much cheaper into the market, into Europe. So I'm immediately bankrupt. And in order that this doesn't happen, that's when I call Berlin, BMWK, that provides 900 million now for the first tender, to compensate for that cost of difference. But it is a little bit like a CFD scheme, but it's really a physical intermediary. So we are the contractual partner on the supply and on the demand side, entering into long-term offtake agreements on the supply side, short-term sales agreement on the offtake side, and the cost of difference is being covered by the German taxpayer, by the ministry.
Interesting. So this morning there was a point in the high-level panel that, and you're talking about a funding mechanism, right, that is supposed to facilitate all of this. The point that was made was that, in fact, capital is not the problem. Firstly, do you agree with that sentiment? But secondly, connecting that, how does a South Africa that we know that green hydrogen is a green fields for us in particular, as you know, becoming a net exporter of hydrogen to countries such as Germany and many other markets, how do we benefit from this kind of funding mechanism that H2 Global exists for and to facilitate?
First of all, I fully agree. There's ample of funding and money out there. You know, if we want to get from the billions to the trillions that it's always been proclaimed, there is a lot of money out there. All the black
Hang on,
rocks,
Mr. Boland.
all the PICs.
Is there anyone looking for money? We all heard that there is money out there, right?
Yeah.
There's one hand. Surely it just can't be you. There are three hands.
Exactly. But obviously, this is not stupid money. This is smart money. They need to have investment certainty. That is exactly how HG Global has been developed, because my background is, I'm a banker by background. So when I designed HINCO and the mechanism, I looked at it from a banker's point of view. How would an institutional investor, how would a banker give money into a project to have exactly these three criteria: price certainty, market certainty, legal certainty? That creates exactly that business case. And once we have that in place, we don't have to worry about money. There's lots of institutional money out there that is trying to get in. I mean, the PIC, I led a lot with the PIC in the past year in South Africa, and I'm really happy about that announcement that was made yesterday. How can South Africa, you know, benefit from an instrument like H2 Global? First of all, we're really happy that SAGHS is the first South African also partner, I would call it, within the H2 Global Foundation. But however, it's a global tender that we're doing here, so we really hope that we see a lot of projects from South Africa, you know, coming into the upcoming tender. But it's also a huge opportunity. You know, South Africa is well positioned with the combination of local offtake. You got the industry here. We just heard this morning, I think 13 million tons of hydrogen is being produced and utilized here in South Africa. And that you can combine with export, and then you really get into scalability. So it's a huge opportunity. And then there's also, with a very, let's say, distinct model of H2 Global, it's like a modular system. We call it the window logic. The first window now is for an auction which is taking place internationally, import into Europe from production outside of Europe. You can also set up for future funding windows, dedicated regional windows, for example, a Sub-Saharan Africa window, where the production would only take place within Sub-Saharan Africa or Southern Africa, import into Europe. So that is something where, South Africa and Africa as a whole could benefit from instruments like H2 Global.
As I move to Hosiame, and I know that sometimes it's easier to focus on what has worked, right? And I'd like to, when I come back to you, let's reflect a little bit on what has not worked, or at least where are some of the ridges which we then need to deal with, particularly when you're looking at markets such as South Africa. Hosiame, firstly, thank you for being the sponsor of this wonderful event. Sasol has done amazingly well. I think she deserves a hand. But most importantly, Sasol seems to be almost pioneering in this space, right? And to a great extent, that this kind of pioneering, and we know that, from its establishment as a company, Sasol, from the days of apartheid, it had always been this kind of a pioneer. What are the key areas, particularly from a public infrastructure point of view, that you think that we should be learning from markets such as Germany, or at least as far as Sasol has been identifying areas of exploration and where we should be focusing on?
No, absolutely. Thanks, Lorato. First of all, let me just reflect a bit before I respond to your question. Not so long ago, we started these green hydrogen roadmaps as South Africa. It was not far off. It is admirable to actually see the pace at which we have now moved. A year ago, we were sitting in these kind of forums defining value chains, trying to find ourselves as South Africa in the map. Today, we're sitting and talking extensive collaboration and partnerships. We're sitting in panels like these where we're actually moving at pace. And I'd like to just confirm one thing, and I agree with Mr. Mansman and my colleagues here, in terms of how aligned we are with the EU and Germany in terms of our energy transition pathways. To answer your question, this is where the alignment, more of it is there from a South African perspective. We've identified similar targets from decarbonization perspective, but where we strongly agree is in terms of identifying green hydrogen production as very key and critical in decarbonization of very heavy industry sectors, transportation. But I think James earlier mentioned a very key point, which is energy security supply. And this is where we are aligned in terms of South Africa, Germany in particular, and the EU. You ask yourself, what are the learnings? We've been talking earlier about collaboration and partnerships. And this is what we have now learned, and we are continuing to learn as South Africa, is let's just learn on how collaborative Germans have been in identifying their pathways, identifying solutions, and congregating in terms of advancing at pace in some of these systems. And in that way, you will see some of the systems that they've put in place that we are actually pioneering, as well as Sasol, together with them in partnership. As H2 Global has indicated before, partnerships that we are forging together to be able to develop these markets across the value chain. I mean, in September, for instance, if we were to just give you an indicator of the pace at which Germany moves, and the EU actually, is when Sasol, a delegation, went and visited Brussels. And this was in a way trying to say, let's advocate for a particular cause, particularly pursuing some of the requirements in the products that we ourselves as South Africa will be producing, making sure that they are certifiable. So we've moved from just defining value chains, but we've gotten to a stage where we are in advance trying to identify and making sure that the products that we will be producing out of South Africa, out of Sasol assets, will be certifiable to be able to be marketable in the global space. And these are being pioneered by the Germans themselves and the EU. So this is actually an exemplary mode of what we are looking at from a South African perspective, and looking at these alliances, looking at regulatory integrations that are happening, infrastructure systems, as Mr. Mansman mentioned earlier, that we can try and find collaboration and really take a cue from that perspective. So Sasol is there in the forefront. As you heard earlier, we've pioneered before. In terms of technology, we've got the FT technology that we've extensively talked about, and we're leveraging on to convert our current gray hydrogen into green hydrogen. Expertise that we have, skills, we've done this before. We've pioneered from a transition of gas in Mozambique 20 years ago. We will do it again. Pioneering in terms of production of methyls and fuel and chemicals, and we will continue again daring with the assets that we already have, and of course with input with renewable energy, trying to convert these current assets that we have and continuing to pioneer as Sasol. So that's the trajectory that we're in. But we do this not alone. We do it in partnerships, as I said. And partnerships not only with our own government that's supporting us and spearheading this from all levels, provinces, but we do it with financiers that are in the room, with collaborators that I'm sitting next to. So as we continue, we are bold in our steps and our strategic intents, but we do it, of course, with partnerships and collaborations.
It would be remiss of me, Khusiame, to, and of course, everything that you say deserves an acknowledgement, and a huge acknowledgement. But I guess the lesson we've taken from the German energy issue right now with the Ukraine-Russia war is that there may be disruptions along the line. If we are going to be a net exporter of hydrogen products, the likelihood of logistics come into play. Sasol will then have to be, looking, as you speak about, you may not be in the transport and logistics space, but you're going to find partners that help you to export to the likes of Germany. But how do you mitigate on those risks? Or what are the plans that Sasol is at least putting into place? And it may not necessarily be from a Sasol perspective only as a business, but from a South Africa perspective in terms of ensuring that should there be such a disruptor, and we know particularly the east coast of Africa is prone to some civil war that sometimes spill onto the seas of those respective countries as well. Is there a plan of some sort that Sasol is at least thinking about from a risk mitigation point of view?
Absolutely. I mean, and this again speaks to the very core of partnerships and collaborating and diversifying your portfolios as well as you go. And this is exactly what we're identifying, is these partnerships should not only be confined into one geographic setting. And as you see, we are talking to Europe, we are talking to Japan, and we're collaborating in other sectors as well. But important, it's not only export market that we're looking at, Lorato, is as we're looking at the export space, we're busy continuing to incubate our local demand. Of course, in terms of aggregating, it won't be as significant, as big as it starts off, but we're saying if we compete in the market and produce green hydrogen that is cost competitive, it allows us to play in all of these sectors that will then mitigate a concentrated risk like we've seen in Russia and Ukraine. And of course, you cannot completely avoid that, but of course, if we continue keeping our production flowing, making sure that we're providing and demand that is well spread across the geography, we will be able to then mitigate it one way or the other in terms of focus of risk.
Thank you so much, Khusiame. Just a reminder that we will not be taking questions using the roving mic. If you have any questions, please remember to log into the app and ask your question, and we'll raise the question. And if you have a specific panelist that you'd like to ask the question to, you please indicate in the app. Dr. Tobias, it's good and well to talk about the importance of regulation. It's good and well to talk about, how Germany has been doing relatively well, talking about the funding mechanism that is in place. And a lot of the people in this room may have also walked the rooms to see, a number of at least showcases of either technology or products. Share a little bit about, one or two of the projects that you have in place and what has been in terms of the traction that you've been able to gain over time.
Yes, Lorato, we're very, very glad to do so. So we, as Enertruck, we are a renewable energy company with around 1,000 employees based in Germany, but with strong activity in South Africa as well. We have a large development pipeline here. We develop, build, own, and operate plants that we label it combined hydrogen and power plants, so that integrate wind, sun, electrolyzer, battery, real electrification of hydrogen, everything in one package, in one geographical location, in order to produce dispatchable power. predictable dispatchable power on the one side, and then green hydrogen on the other side. That is the core of our business, and we do that in a number of partnerships, including here in South Africa. We have 3 of the projects that were mentioned by Minister De Lille on the infrastructure list are projects that we are either involved in or that are our projects. The most prominent one that I would like to mention, especially in this context, because we are really, all of us, the whole team is crossing fingers for H2 Global, is the High Shift project that we are developing together with Sasol and Linde in the Secunda context. That's a 200 megawatt electrolyzer that we are planning with 450 megawatt of adjacent renewables from wind and solar in the Mpumalanga province next to Secunda. We'll come to that for a moment, what that means to us as well. And the purpose of that facility is to convert roughly 1% of the entire Secunda plant from gray hydrogen to green hydrogen. And that 1% now leads to some of the product that Secunda is producing today as we speak is already certified aviation fuel. It's the only Fischer-Tropsch reactor in the entire world that is certified for aviation fuel. It's a huge first mover advantage of Sasol in South Africa. And by feeding green hydrogen into the existing facility, we can, pending the certification requirements around that, produce a portion of the product as certified green aviation fuel, sustainable aviation fuel, or e-kerosene, however you want to label it. And that we want to pitch under H2 Global to give the investment certainty. Because also let's face it, with all the excitement that's in this room, in all the rooms that we had, and it's great to see this excitement around green hydrogen. I think long overdue. But let's face it, we are still at the extreme beginning of an S-curve, and there will be substantial first mover disadvantage in the first projects that deploy. We've seen that in solar, we've seen that in wind. That is the nature, because the product that we produce is green hydrogen, is a commodity. You cannot differentiate. It's different to an IP-driven business where you create something new, it comes at a high cost, but you have IP that protects you. If I produce a new laptop, I'm IP protected, not for green hydrogen. If we are producing green hydrogen together, that is more expensive than the second, third, fourth project. We are basically, why should we not rather wait 5 years, right, and only deploy it? So that's exactly where government comes in. And that's where instruments like H2 Global are so important to overcome this first mover disadvantage, because otherwise nobody will move, and then there is no first mover, let's say. Yeah. And maybe just a few sentences on the specific location in Mpumalanga. What's also extremely important for us, not only on the green hydrogen side, but also on the pure renewable side, is when we started to become active in South Africa about a bit more than 5 years ago. We immediately started to develop both wind and solar projects in Mpumalanga, in the coal region of the country, because we are of the firm belief that we will not have an energy transition if we don't proactively take the phase-out industry with us and provide opportunities for the industry that is in decline to actually play a part in that transition. It's not sustainable to build everything. We will have a lot of renewables built in the Northern Cape, no doubt, but it's not sustainable to build everything there and simply believe that Mpumalanga will ramp down economically and that's the way it is. No, it won't, because then we will have not a transition at all. And that's why we started to deploy METMAS with the help of BMBF, by the way, because it was at the time 5 years ago, everybody said there is no wind in Mpumalanga. Now we have more than 10 METMASts operational for multiple years, and we can now not say it through gut feeling, we can now prove it with measured data that the wind resource in Mpumalanga is in some areas on par with Western Cape wind resources. It's not the best like best Northern and Eastern Cape, but it's definitely economically viable wind deployment possible in Mpumalanga. And that's extremely important for the just transition to create jobs also where they will fall away necessarily through the transition. The repurposing of Secunda, I think, is a mammoth task for Sasol and for the country. We have to repurpose it. It's not an option to ramp down Secunda. It's simply not. And last point, now back on the technical side, from the socioeconomic, what's in it for the host country? of course, there's a lot in it from investment, from inflow of low cost capital because of a AAA plus underwriter of the German government. These are all things that are positive. But there's another thing. Any green hydrogen project anywhere in the world, wherever you design it, the design concept is always to overbuild the renewables in order to achieve a high utilization of the electrolyzer. And what that means is that you always have anywhere between 10 to 20% surplus electricity from the renewables that you build that you cannot use in the electrolyzer, even if you wanted to. So that surplus is always there, and I don't have to tell you that in the current situation in South Africa, I think this is very much welcomed that this surplus will be there, because that's investment into generation that would otherwise, without the green hydrogen project, not happen.
So considering that you also refer to the role of government in making sure that your ability to establish and quicken the processes has helped. I imagine somebody in the room may be thinking about, are there areas of policy and practically where you know that there was a specific policy that enabled you to be able to implement quicker, but there may be another one where you say that if this was fixed, or at least if it was pivoted in a different direction, it would quicken things for companies such as yours and other players in the market?
I think I must applaud the South African government here, because a number of things have been moved out of the way in the last months, actually, or years already. One important one, the limitation of new build power generating assets to 100 megawatt, that has been removed. It's not a limitation anymore, so the market can decide how much to build. On the permitting side, I must say, also coming from a European environment, with a lot of our permits being done in Germany, France, Poland, Spain, permitting is, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's really, really straightforward in South Africa. It's very well designed. There's very clear processes. There are strict timelines to which the government authorities also adhere. So there, I know you're looking for something where it could improve, but I want to use this also as a kind of round of applause for the South African government on all levels.
I think we deserve a round of applause that we're doing permitting well.
I think it has to be said, because in Germany, it easily takes 7 years to get a wind farm permitted. Here we are talking 1.5 to 2 years, so it's a big advantage. Now, I think the biggest challenge that we have in South Africa is probably on the offtake side when it comes to local demand. The procurement programs are there, but they are simply too slow. It should run. The renewable procurement program should run probably 4 times a year, and not like once every 2 years, and then once every year, let's say. So more frequent procurement. On the H2 Global side, I think that's because the off-taker is someone else, so that there, to a large extent, that is addressed. In the procurement in the South African power sector, I think what we need to anticipate is how do we procure dispatchable power? That's the next step. Because renewables is fine, the wind and solar procurement program, it works, just run, replicate. But how do we procure dispatchable power? How do we procure hydrogen-driven gas engines, fuel cells? How should they be compensated for? They provide capacity rather than energy, but the procurement program at the moment compensates on the basis of energy. So how do we do that? I think that's the one big thing where there are still question marks, and I'll leave that at that.
Thank you so much, Fergus. Segueing from Dr. Tobias, right? Firstly, give us an overview of what Atlantia does. But importantly, Dr. Tobias talks about, or at least touches a little bit on the socio-economic part of the renewable space, right? And a lot of South Africans, we have a very terrible memory of last July when we had the unrest, because many people are unemployed, and the common refrain, whether it is true or not, it's a completely different story, is that the move away from, the transition away from coal energy as an energy source to renewables, it means that lesser jobs, which then puts the social risk higher. What are companies such as yourself doing in terms of ensuring that, and I know in the mining there would be a framework called the social labor plan, which ensures that when you set up a plant or when you sink a shaft, there should be dedicated targets along how many people we intend to employ, but most importantly, ensuring that we localize procurement from here, skills development, and the likes. Just share a little bit on that.
Sure. Thank you, Lorato. So we are Atlantia. We are a green hydrogen developer at scale, targeting the EU market, given its incentive programs. We're also part of the cohort of projects that was announced this morning for imminent gazetting. So yeah, we feel that we're in good company. We've got
Imminent gazetting deserves a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it. That's, so we're very proud of our achievements to date. We started with a vision. One of our partners who's not here today, from 2015, he's been bugging me, let's build a hydrogen bike. We both worked in the early 2000s in electrolysis, generating hydrogen. I maintained with these hands hydrogen compressors, 200 bar Hoffer machines, good German technology. So we know what we are dealing with. As an entity, we are fairly new on the scene. As individuals, I'm the youngest in the team with 24 years of experience, to just try and give you the scale of our depth we have here. And it's spread across the electrical grid integration, renewables integration into that grid, as well as battery. Right? We've made grey hydrogen at scale at the Secunda complex, one of our partners, and Jurong Island in Singapore. We've one partner ran that facility. Yep. So we're pretty comfortable and we're pretty au fait. Our Heather, our other company, our other partner, is currently producing maybe some of the electrons that's running into this room right now via the 2 utility scale wind farms that she helped develop, and is still part of the maintenance crew of it. So that being said, right, we do understand the challenges that we face. We've had very early, look, our project is destined to be housed in the Saldanha Bay IDZ as well, at least the processing bits thereof. We've had very robust discussions with the municipality, very passionate people about looking after their constituency, and they will keep us honest, right? Other than that, we've had a look at the area, right? I mean, we were at the Oslo Metal facility. There's 1,500 people that were impacted. I think with a move to greenify the facility, I think 900 jobs will be recreated. There's still then a balance there, of people that needs to be educated, or integrated into the bigger picture. The skills that you have within a processing facility, like a smelter, is very transferable into the type of processing plants that we would run. Ammonia is not a new technology. Hydrogen is not a new technology. Air separation, which we will do. I ran 9 plants across the country for 4 years. It's not a new technology. It's about 87 years old. So we're comfortable with what we're doing, and we do understand that the skills that were impacted, for example, by, let's call it Oslo Metal event, can be easily integrated into facilities such as this, right? There's a knock-on effect with, your contracting crews that did maintenance on those facilities, not just the directly impacted jobs. A pump is a pump. It doesn't care in what facility it is, right? We will provide jobs for those technicians, those fitters that work on it. At scale, we're looking at a 2,500 ton per day ammonia facility, green ammonia facility. The indirect jobs is in the vicinity of about 10,000 indirect jobs, and I think that's similar numbers we've seen coming out of Australia and Chile at the same scale. We've typically, the Saldanha Bay IDZ, they've got their own social investment program running. They've got a skills program running there with their innovation hub that they're running. Typically the stuff that Patrick is doing there can very easily be integrated and dovetailed with our offerings. Further than that, we're also looking at scarce skills in this field like cryogenics. For an industry that's over 100 years old, right, there's not one university in South Africa that offers a dedicated cryogenics course. When you're talking about liquefied hydrogen, when you're talking about LNG as maybe a transition, you are going to need cryogenic skills. So we are engaging at that level. We've typically have experience with developing SACHS accredited courses, that you can train technicians or retrain affected technicians. We are very comfortable, having looked at the mast manufacturing in Atlantis in this node. There's the turbine manufacturing in Kucha. There's in Isando, for example, there's the team starting to do their own fuel cells and electrolyzers. So there will be significant local component that we can integrate in terms of enterprise development as well as jobs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Mansman, as we take the last round, and I want you to think about this question because I'm seeing the audience is not preferring to use the app. If there are any questions, please raise your hand. I'll come around with the mic in case there's anyone who wants to ask the question and has decided not to use the app. SAGHS talks about the skills, right? Particularly the scarce skill. And from a German perspective, perhaps, you know, share with us what should be the lessons that we take, particularly around, you know, although if you look at the National Development Plan, it talks about the green economy, or at least highlights and lifts out the green economy. But it does not go as granular as should we start with the green hydrogen economy. What kind of skill base does it require, both from a general skill point of view and this, you know, high scarce level of skill? What should South Africans be learning from yourselves who have done this for quite a while?
Yeah. What should you learn? Yeah, we should learn that I think we just focus too much on the energy side of the whole production. Yeah, it's not only energy; it's also the supply of chemistry. Finally, so, and it means that we all in the world have to see that the value chains will change. This is maybe a problem for Germany, for countries like Germany, who are very advanced in the value chains, and there's a big chance for all countries who are not so far in this process. And I think especially for South Africa, because in some kinds you are experienced, you have chances you can use in this process. It's not only energy, it's also chemistry, value chains in different ways. And I think this is the main thing to learn now, if you change this. I think we all understand there are two possibilities to react. You can receive the future coming over you. Yeah? And this will be a future where depending on fossils will be negative for every country. Every country who wants to take part on this can take advantage of the chances lying in there. So I think every country who is now learning to start the transformation concerning not only domestic, but also thinking globally, yeah, is an advantage of not only creating the future, but also creating jobs, creating new industries, and we do not know yet what exactly that means. Yeah, it's a big transformation. Nobody knows exactly what is coming. But I can say absolutely for sure, who is not taking part will get nothing.
Hosiami, you are nodding, and I imagine from an adaptive strategy point of view.
Vigorously, because it is a very, very fundamental point
Sure.
that Mr. Mansman is raising. That this is not really only about energy security or decarbonization. As a result, we're starting and defining an economy. And this new economy similarly is how it erupted when we created an oil economy years back. And how you look at it and how you relate and reflect on it is what the resultant opportunities are going to come out of inventing or starting a new economy. And this go to economic development, job security, and these extended partnerships globally as well come with a whole lot of skills development acumen, and it's mutual. So it's not only from a German side or EU side, but it's mutually beneficial. You initially called us pioneers as SASO. There's quite a lot to learn, having taken some of the technologies from Germany and made useful end of it in South Africa. There was quite a lot of mutual learning. But it is important, Lorato, to actually define this as Lorato as critical in really defining a new economy and taking the communities, taking the growth economic development sectors that are in here, new sectors. So you look at it from the entire value chain and seeing how does it boost the economy of the country, not just only energy security, not only just decarbonization, but economic growth across the world. And we saw with Russia and Ukraine, how when we thought they were so advanced in terms of their gas production, this is where they also finding themselves in where they're finding themselves, is to learn out of what has happened there. So it's really around a perspective of economy that we're building.
Fergus, as your at least closing comment, and I'm not seeing any hands, I'm taking, oh, there's a hand. I will come back, I'm posing that question for you. May I please ask that you pass the mic to the gentleman at the back?
Sorry, this question, Ibrahim Takolia from Green Hydrogen Solutions. This question is for H2 Global. Is price going to be so there's two parts. Is price going to be the only determinant? And then the second part is, the US is sending a lot of LNG to Europe. And their idea is that in a few years, and the Biden administration has already announced that they're going to give a $3 subsidy. And Canada has announced a 40% tax credit. So if price is the determinant, how will South Africa compete, or any other country that doesn't get a subsidy?
Any other question from the floor?
Thank you. As we've seen, the problem that Germany now faces with their energy is their reliance on gas, where they're committed to Russia on a large degree, and that was due to the principle of Handel durch Wandel, Wandel durch Handel. And I want to know what guarantees the takeoff of hydrogen products from a country like South Africa, from a country like Germany, that's, call it a mistake for now, in hindsight we're always wiser, doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You may continue answering.
Sure. Yeah, so price is indeed the determining factor at the first tender here. So there's a certain sort of threshold that needs to be overcome in regards to the criteria that are being applied, and then the price will be the determining factor. But however, there is a double subsidy is excluded here, so we don't have to worry too much about, the IRA or the Americans now taking that out. But the IRA is a complete game changer in the global context of the hydrogen economy. Europe is waking up now. I mean, it's $3 per kilogram green hydrogen. You combine that with $1.38 for the green electricity, you're today in the money with $4.38 that you get for 1 kilogram green hydrogen. So that is a complete game changer. And the US will be like a vacuum cleaner, absorbing all the capacities. And that is where Germany, Europe, and South Africa and other areas are in the same boat. If we don't wake up, if we don't come with bold decisions, we will be in the backseat here in the development. I mean, also one of the lessons learned from H2 Global, what I see is, we Germans always have the tendency to start things only when we are 100 or even 110% sure that everything is perfect and right, and then we start. In this case, we don't have the time to wait. If we want to reach the climate targets, we need to start now, and we need to start fast. And that is, I think, where instruments like H2 Global, providing that sort of a playground where you can allow mistakes. We will make mistakes. Next year for the next auction, I'm sure, and I hope we will be a bit smarter than we are today. But we need that sort of playing fields, playgrounds to make that mistakes to start today. We don't have enough time to wait.
But I guess also what I'm hearing from the question you're asking is, should South Africa's green hydrogen economy, it's in its infancy, should we be considering some sort of subsidies as well for our local players and developers so that we give them that edge? Is it something that should be done, or is it something that you think that we ought to be, it needs a rethink?
I would definitely consider doing something, maybe not only in the South African context, but maybe in the Southern Africa context. Instruments like H2 Global can also be applied within that context. Also bring in, I don't know, talk to the GCF, talk to the World Bank, bring in other partners. I think there is a huge opportunity here also to foster, not only to focus on the export, but also, as I said, South Africa, you have the big advantage, you have the economy here, you have the absorption capacity here, the need to do that transition. Go for it.
Commissioner Tilly, he asked a question that I think I'd like you to respond to it briefly. And I think we have one more hand, or two more hands, and I'll allow for only those two at this moment, and we'll then go to our closing remarks because we are doing good for time.
Yeah, it was a question, Wandel durch Handel. It means change by commerce, or change by interacting commercially. what we finally felt politically in Germany is that we were blackmailed by Russia. Finally, blackmailed by Russia in the sense of Germany needed 50% of the gas was imported from Russia and 30% of fuels, yeah, diesels and so. We felt to be told, if you complain against this war, we will stop your energy. And this stop of your energy will be very, very brutal for your winter. And that's true. And we never want to be blackmailed again. And it's not the first time in history. In 1973, we had a similar crisis, energy crisis. What is the conclusion we have? The conclusion is we need a much more sane market of energy globally. And I'm quite sure renewable energies give this, have the substance of being like this. A lot of players can take part. And I think especially South Africa is really a great country for this production. And I don't know in 20 or 30 years if South Africa is an important deliverer of energy to Germany or not. But I'm quite sure every energy you produce, you will find somewhere in the world someone who will buy it or would buy it. And for you, it's the chance to come from being dependent on energies, because your situation is not so much different from the German situation, to you can change it, being more proactive. Germany has not the chance in the same way. We estimate about 30% maybe we can produce for ourselves, and we will need 70% of imports. So we want to develop global cooperations which are more on eye level than we had before. And for that, of course, South Africa is a very, very attractive partner. But it's much more than we just want to deliver, just want to develop a delivery country. We can see your skills. For example, I'm quite sure very important is the future of aviation. Aviation is important for the world, also for being interconnected. Yeah, and I know no better country in the world to replace fossil aviation fuels by renewable aviation fuels. Sustainable aviation fuels. That's what I saw at SAGHS, and I hope that you go much more in this direction, make it green, and you have a really great business case for all over the world. Yeah? And that's what is the conclusion about. And I'm quite sure you cannot prevent that a single country becomes aggressive in any way, and this will always have consequences for business. But the more players will take place in this whole market, the less the dangers are in that way. And you can see we have the atlas, the renewable energy atlas for Africa. 31 countries we scrutinized what is the potential. The potential in Africa is huge. It's really great, and it's really enough to make Africa emission-free, CO2-free, and parts of the rest of the world. And this is a great business case for Africa and a great thing for Europe too.
Aika from Japan. I want to know the EU or German strategy how to import your African hydrogen. I know there are several pipelines through Mediterranean Sea, so you might import hydrogen through their pipeline if that is produced in the northern part of Africa. But in the southern part, for example, South Africa might import ammonia through the ship. But there are, if you do so, don't you have any facility to use ammonia in your country or Europe? The two questions.
Let me take the second question.
Thank you very much. My name is Jane Waldwatch. I'm the Executive Director for SASCO. So from the whole day, I've listened to a lot of projects and programs and investments and so many plans, but I have not heard the plan around the most important thing, which is research and capacity development, which is really going to sustain everything else that you are saying. Maybe from the panel, I just want to know the plans you have, because I don't see the engineers and scientists and economists that are actually going to sustain this industry. Thank you.
Perhaps, Khusiame, start with that question around science, research and development, because we know that Sasol invests a lot of money in R&D.
We certainly do, and we've got a whole flagship focus area in research and development in Sasol, and we've done that not only with green hydrogen, but throughout, as I said, having created that skill and expertise to be in this industry from a fuels and chemicals perspective. But particularly from a green hydrogen perspective, let's do note what the Department of Science and Innovation in South Africa has started. If you recall when I started, is this journey of green hydrogen doesn't start today. Actually, the Departments of Science and Innovation in South Africa have been a pioneer in developing and defining a roadmap from time immemorial in terms of how you transition into green hydrogen. So there is strong impetus there. We've got capacity from a department government perspective, and sitting even within Sasol, the expertise that sit in their R&D department that just focuses on identifying these value chains and channels is there in the country. So I think that's one area actually from a South Africa perspective where we started from a technology perspective and then evolved into commercialization strategies, but it's quite advanced in that space.
Thank you, Khusiame. Timo, I think you wanted to also share perspective.
Maybe also on two aspects. First of all, also on capacity building. I mean, the German side, the colleagues of GIZ are here. There's a project called H2 Global, which is H2 South Africa and H2 Brazil, for example, which is also being funded by the German government, also addressing exactly these issues. What do we need aside market ramp up and the market creation? We need the right skill set. We need the right technicians. We need the right labors to be educated, to be performed. But that is also what needs to be addressed aside. And I think it's just the first step, like, you know, instruments like H2 South Africa, H2 Brazil, that are going along that side, and we need more of that. Otherwise, if we don't have the right labor, we won't be able to fulfill our task. In regards to the question, ammonia, what role does ammonia play? I mean, it's again a little bit like the chicken and egg situation. If there's not a guaranteed supply of green ammonia, nobody will start on the appliance side to switch over to ammonia. There are lots of appliances of ammonia and methanol, for example, in areas beyond the current industrial offtake. But in order to do that, we need to guarantee the supply, and that is why it's so important that we also ramp up the supply side, and the demand side will follow. And in the medium to long term, obviously, once pipelines are in the play, that will be a game changer really to do the really final transition into a fully fledged green economy. But for the next 10, 15 years, derivatives like ammonia, like methanol will play a very vital part.
We are almost out of time. Fergus, as you share your closing remarks, this year South Africa is celebrating the 10th year, and it's the 10th year anniversary of the National Development Plan, which of course lifts out the green economy as one of those important economies. What do you see in the next 10 years? Dr. Tobias, reflect on that immediately after Fergus. Please share your perspectives as well.
I think within the next 10 years, I mean, we obviously have our own aspirations. We're typically looking at establishing an at-scale facility. We're typically looking at replicating that. But very importantly, we see our role, you know, the first mover that we were talking about, we are living those hazards right now. You know, we have to watch out for friendly fire from the back as you're running too far ahead. So we see our role as paving the road for that we are wanting to walk on, and for those to follow as well. Right? There are bigger players here who've got very defined ways and strategies how to do it. We are crafting it as we're going along. And we're hoping to be a case study in 10 years' time where advanced programs look back and says, that's how you do it. Thank you.
A round of applause for Fergus Altman. Dr. Tobias?
I think in 10 years from today, we'll have seen that South Africa in the beginning of the 20s has fully grasped the opportunity that presents itself around renewables and around green hydrogen. I would be surprised if in 10 years if we still see a lot of coal-based energy supply in the country, because I think since this change once started can be extremely fast once you have overcome the first mover disadvantage, and then the country and the region, by the way, will have positioned itself as a very competitive green hydrogen production hub in the world. And from a global perspective, I think in 10 years from now we will see the start of the establishment of a much more diverse and therefore much more robust and much less potential for holding others to ransom type of energy supply in the world, because we will have many, many more different supply possibilities, where South Africa and Southern Africa is in a very competitive space, but it's not like in oil and gas where you only have 5 potential supplier regions. In green hydrogen, anybody can literally supply green hydrogen, but some areas and countries can do it better, and that's the advantage that South Africa can build on. And I hope that especially Europe will reach out its hand to what I would wish for, a preferred partnership with supplier countries of the global south to proactively stimulate and create that new energy trade web, let's say, and not just let it happen, but proactively stimulate that. Because I believe especially the countries of the global south, especially those that don't make a lot of money with oil and gas today, they don't have the money to put supply subsidies in place. So that's the one disagreement with Timo. I would not suggest South Africa to put supply subsidies in place for that ramp up. I would rather say, Europe, you put demand subsidies in place in order to establish a preferred energy trade partnership with countries of the global south that share the same values. And then we have many, many supplier countries, not just a handful. And then we have, in technical terms, we have an N-1 reliability in the system, which means the biggest supplier can always fail and the system still works. And we didn't have that so far, but we need to achieve that.
A round of applause for Dr. Tobias Bischoff-Names. At last, panelists disagree for a chance. Hosiame, Commissioner Mansman talks about the need for boldness. What should we look out for when we think about boldness with regards to South Africa and green economy, green hydrogen in the next 10 years?
You're already seeing it, Lorato. You don't even have to wait for 10 years. What we've done as South Africa is you've spoken a lot about regulations, key enablers, but we took a bold move that in the midst of the absence of clear strategy at the time, we decided that we will go ahead and implement pilot projects. There were pilot projects then, but actually they are flagship projects that we are currently boldly implementing as first mover advantage that you've mentioned. So we're already there. So in 10 years' time, we see ourselves playing a leading role in Africa, from a South Africa perspective, even SASO, in playing these markets off. We see ourselves with our well endowments that we have, leveraging on them and positioning ourselves globally to compete. We see ourselves completely aggregated, being able to compete in providing a molecule that is cost competitive. We see ourselves with a bigger, drawn-out economy that's growing based on this particular economy, green hydrogen economy that we see. So we are very, very bold. And I think we really need to make sure that as I started earlier, we will only do so as we collaborate to become this leading playing role, to aggregate in terms of scale, to collaborate to drive these costs down, to collaborate to create these economies. So we are well advanced on our way there. So I don't even see it in 10 years' time. I see it sooner than we anticipate, Lorato, based on the initiatives that we've implemented from a South Africa perspective, pioneered by SASO in the front.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Hosiame Kwele. We have come to the end of our session. We are now breaking for tea. I hope this was a relatively insightful and worthwhile conversation. Please let us continue having chats over tea. Thank you so much and good afternoon.
We would like to take this opportunity to thank the sponsors. The Green Hydrogen Summit South Africa 2022 Cape Town was sponsored by Sasol, Anglo American, Aqua Power, Industrial Development Corporation, the Northern Cape Province, Western Cape Government, and Westgrow, in partnership with the Republic of South Africa, German Corporation, Infrastructure South Africa, and the Digital Council.